Alright, ladies and gentlemen, Chili Games back again. And I recently saw a question on T-Bull's Discord, and it reminded me that I had a gameplay in the Graf Spee that I wanted to show from a couple weeks back. As you can see real quick, this is the commander that I actually went with. This is my first game. I'm using Scharnhorst, and it's not probably the preferable build for it. I don't know. We had Scharnhorst leveled up for the inspiration, so I was like, you know what, let's just try it. Because we'll get the dispersion, and one thing about the Graf Spee that I learned very, very quickly is that your guns are great for killing cruisers, and they can do some pretty significant damage to battleships. But your dispersion is German, 100%, and with your 20-second reload on these guns, can be quite bad. Quite bad. As you can see, like, obviously this is my first game. I'm checking out the torpedo angles. I actually played a stint of about 3 games in this ship, and I think I averaged like 4 kills, and I think I got a Kraken in the next game after this, but I didn't record it because I was just like, okay, I gotta go. So, everyone's favorite spawn on this map here, I honestly don't know if it's worse to spawn with a DD here or without. Because if you spawn with a DD here, 90% of the time, they're going to start going left, and they're just going to run away from this cap here. And then you're left with an enemy DD, presumably on this side. And then what do you do? So, decided not to run, obviously, before getting my hands on this ship. Excuse me. Before getting my hands on this ship, I was like, you know what? This, with heals, and it has torpedoes, it has a little bit of turtleback. I was thinking, you know, I'm probably going to want to play this like I play Hipper and the Prince Eugen. And as you see, the Nassau is a really tough nut to crack. That ship, for some reason, is just, whenever I play it, the guns, like, let's say, like, I had a game yesterday in the Nassau. Real quick before we continue with this gameplay, Nassau has pretty small guns comparatively to the other battleships at the tier, and I was 1v1ing a Kaiser, and my guns just were not doing a single thing, and he was slapping me pretty hard, even angled. But whenever I face one, the Nassau is just like a walnut. It's very short, it is very compact, it has a lot of armor, and especially with these guns will struggle for sure. Unless they're broadside and you get actually decent pins on it. So, realizing that this spawn is quickly being flooded, like it usually does, I am spotted, so that must mean that there's a DD to our right, way out in the right field over there. And we have our battleships pushing forward, which, you know, it's a question of, should you play your support? Yes. But does that mean always? No. Because if you see teammates overextending, you have to make the decision of, okay, are they going to die quick enough? Are they just that bad? If I support this and they flunk out and they die, then I'm effectively dead too. So I decide to make this my chance to kind of make my way across this gap here, because where I want to go is in between this next gap and get my torpedoes away at the big battleships that I'm not going to be able to 1v1 or 1v2 these guys, because Graf Spee is pretty well armored. Cruiser v cruiser, Graf Spee is probably definitely one of the best at tier 5, but it can take pretty significant damage versus battleships, and it has a pretty difficult time shelling out the damage back to them unless they're close. So Shot those torpedoes at the Nassau. Looks like we're going to get 1 or 2. We actually sink 2, which is massive. That damage means that that Nassau is now a one-shot, basically. And since we don't have a destroyer, I had pretty much already decided that, well, I will not be able to counter that destroyer either. And unfortunately, my teammates are dead. So now I'm having to play as if, you know, I'm trying to set myself up best to try and make a stand here, because I don't know, you might say that this is leaving your teammates out to dry, but I also don't want to throw away my life and try to risk it for 2 battleships that ran straight into 4 enemy ships and a destroyer that none of us could have seen. So it was one of those decisions that's just like, it's you know, pushing forward and brawling is never the only play you should use. You see a lot of German battleships do that, and it's like, all right, well, especially Bismarck. Let's use Bismarck as an example. Even Gneisenau Tirpitz, the ones that have even more of a chance to brawl because of the torpedoes. The only play in your playbook should not be brawling, even in those ships that specify and are best at brawling. Some games are going to be very, very difficult to actually get into those brawling situations, and if you try to force it, you're just going to wind up being someone's damage farm and just ultimately get killed, especially if the enemy team has a destroyer that you can't see. So running any battleship without destroyer support, or even a radar cruiser that's playing somewhat close, that knowingly knows that there's a destroyer and still decides to rush in, that player is going to die anyways. Like, that's just, it's not going to work out. You're not going to spot them. You have to assume that that DD is going to be decent. You can't depend on that DD player actually getting spotted or whatnot. We actually get a pretty decent hit on that Nassau there. See, now he's broadside to us, so the guns are starting to work, but as soon as he starts to angle, our results start to dwindle. Like I was saying about this Mutsuki, he was unspotted for those 2 battleships, but miraculously spots himself for me, which was like, okay, this is kind of weird. So now we're in kind of a weird spot where we're actually in a pretty decent spot considering the spawn and how many ships came over here, but what's happening is we're essentially in a 1v1 now. We're ultimately in a 1v4, but we've put it to where 2 ships are behind an island, so we can now focus down this Nassau who was really low health. And again, the Mutsuki comes around the corner. I apologize again. The Mutsuki comes around the corner again, and I'm risking broadside here, but I know that these guns struggle very, very hard against destroyers. That salvo was pretty uncharacteristic, but if you are trying to 1v1 a full health destroyer, that can be an absolute nightmare. So, get the Mutsuki, finish off the Nassau with the torpedo, and now it is essentially a 1v1 against the Amelie. I know there's also a Fuso at some point, but we've done a good job of trying to play this island to where it's going to be, at least try to make it 1v1s. And the biggest thing that I was worried about here is, okay, crap. The Amelie, just like a lot of the French cruisers, are very lightly armored, so that means that aiming for the Citadel can be quite difficult. So I know that this guy is sailing out broadside, which is honestly his best option here. You see that I'm shooting straight at his straight at the waterline and getting ultimately nothing. So what's going to have to happen here is obviously dodge that first set of torps, but when he's angled is going to be the best chance that I get at actually killing this guy. So fortunately for us, that's what he elects to do, and somehow get citadels there. I thought he was a little bit more angled. Okay, so here we go. I was like, all right, not bad. Not too bad at all. That was really scary, but this is scary as well. you're still a cruiser. You still take massive damage, and he even missed probably 60% of his salvo and still shaved off a very sizable portion. But I now know that he has to reload, and these torpedoes, 4 on each side, are very good at this kind of engagement. If you can minimize the time where you are spotted and you can play battleships in a close proximity like this, it is pretty much all but dead. And guys, that is my first impression of the Graf Spee. I think it's a pretty fun ship, honestly. I need to play it more, but if you are looking to get the Graf Spee, it is definitely probably a difficult ship to come to grips with, but I do think it's a lot of fun. So anyways, guys, the video is about to end. I hope y'all enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.